What's going on, everybody? Cullen Gandy here. I wanted to start this video off with a couple of stories that have kind of stuck with me over the years, and they were kind of just like WTF moments that kind of really led to epiphanies later on in my financial, I guess, studies or just discoveries from just being generally unknowledgeable about finance in a past life. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cullen Gandy, and on top of being a mortgage loan originator and a finance and sales consultant, I am also an opera singer who was trained to be an opera singer since the age of 13. And I found that there were several instances where I would run into sort of like a headbutt situation with just everyday folks when it came to the idea about talking about finance and generally just talking about how much you spend and make. And I didn't realize how much of a taboo this subject really was. I didn't really understand why it was so much of a taboo. In 2015, I was a young resident apprentice artist at a certain opera program in Virginia. And I had several colleagues that I had known from college prior who were also joining, singing different roles with us there. One day they came to the opera house, to the place where we all sing, with this new puppy, this fancy new young little 2-week-old puppy, and it was flopping around. It was beautiful. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I would be interested in buying a certain puppy like that as well. So they had mentioned, because we were asking about the puppy and where they thought of getting it, that they didn't rescue the puppy, that they had bought it from a certain breeder somewhere or another. You understand, I really enjoy dogs, especially those dogs of the smaller persuasion. You can just pack them up and take them anywhere, no problems. And since I was generally pretty interested in getting a puppy, I asked them, well, that's really cool. How much did you pay for that dog? I would like a dog. But judging from the response that I got, what they must have heard is, can I wife swap with you just a little bit, just for a day? I mean, the sheer look of the mixture of like anger and I guess like shame. I don't know what, like, but this look, you would have thought I would have been talking about the most grotesque thing that you could have imagined possible. But really all I asked was, how much did you pay for a dog that you are currently showing off in front of everybody and had mentioned that you had bought? So cut to story number 2. I'm a little bit into the sales world. I'm trying to get my feelers going. I'd already had some really good success as a sales consultant and a sales contractor, and I'm interviewing for a job with a certain company that will go unnamed. They seem to be really genuinely interested in the progress that I had made sales developing for these other companies. They had sent me through 2 different interviews, and it got to the point where I was like, well, how much money are you offering to pay people here? How much does somebody with a commensurate amount of experience make in this role? Because I want to be able to put my feelers out and see if we'd be a good fit. And the interviewer seemed a little bit sheepish about this, which I don't understand why. Does anybody go into a job just to go into the job and figure out how much they get paid later? And he responded,
oh, we don't really talk about the salary figures at this point yet. We have to get a little bit more concrete evidence.
I was just like, hey, how much more concrete evidence do you need? We had 2 hours together where I told you my whole life story. You can't throw me a figure you're paying people? I mean, at some point I'm going to need to pay my rent, and I need to know that what you're paying me exceeds that amount, right? And the response again was kind of like,
well, we don't really like to advertise what our rates are or what we're paying people because that seems like really privileged, really personal information.
And that seemed to be the general justification when I would ask people why they would get all riled up about talking about money, especially when it comes to inter-office or intercollegial conversation. We don't like to talk about how much we make, and we don't like to talk about how much we spend for things. But to me, I mean, the idea of money and wages couldn't be less of a personal thing and more of a thing that could be prone to negotiations. And I feel like the more that we talk about money, at least when I talk about money with people, the more we end up fostering a culture and fostering a community that actually ends up getting more of the money, right? And so it sort of occurred to me, like, who benefits from this idea of money as a taboo subject? And surprisingly enough, looking at the data, most people now, in fact, 50% of Americans wouldn't be able to easily come up with a $400 emergency, which I thought was weird. And also, 19% of Americans wouldn't be able to even address it at all. And it seems like if there's that much need, if there's that dire a financial situation in the United States, why is the topic of money not much more prevalent in current society? Well, it only really benefits companies. See, when I talk to individuals about money, they seem pretty unwilling to really reveal too much, usually, not always, and kind of sheepish about the subject. But if you talk to companies about their projections for money and their market share and things like this, they'll always have a very well studied answer. Why don't companies like one employee talking to another employee about money? It's because they have set the standard to where there is a confusion over how people are compensated, when they're compensated, and what actually comprises a competitive offer for an entrance level role in a company. I mean, think about it. How many times have you gone into an interview and they ask you, well, how much do you want to make? And then you're in the awkward situation of being like, well, how much do you think I should be making? And they're like, well, we have a range that we're talking about. It's anywhere from $40,000 to $700,000. And then you're like, well, I'd really like to know how much. And then like, it's kind of like a tango that you do for about 15 minutes before you give them some sort of answer that they seem to be okay with. Well, the reason is because chances are, more often than not, you're going to give them a number that is much lower than what they would be willing to pay you, just because of the confusion that is created from not talking and not being able to talk with employees about their compensation. In fact, at several mortgage companies that I've worked for, the issue around compensation and the revealing of how a comp is structured is actually prohibited. They say by the terms of the contract, but I mean, how are you going to stop people with talking about what they make, right? But what does this mean? Like, why do companies try to do that? Well, I mean, obviously there's a profit motive. So when you click over to the realm of the unionized employee or the person who is able to collectively bargain within a union, it becomes much of a different picture. In fact, pay rates are explicitly stated on the terms of my union contract as an opera singer. You can go anywhere in the structure of a website of my opera union and see what the pay rate would be for a certain role, or if you're in the chorus, how much you're paid, how much you should be paid, and how much the house that you're singing for would be obligated to pay you depending on what their size is. Now, it should be a surprise to nobody that in this case, the unionized employee is almost always getting much better benefits, much better pay structure than any of the non-unionized counterparts. I guess this is just my video to draw attention to this subject because it's something that I'm personally passionate about and something that I would like for you to give your input about. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that people should become more comfortable with talking about how much they make? And would you be more comfortable talking about how much you make if asked? Now, one way that I've gotten around this kind of confusion that companies and corporations create around the idea of pay is that I really try to do my homework personally, right? And that means that if I'm going to apply to a certain company, let's say I'm applying to Amerisave, right? And I want to know their comp structure. Just Google it, right? You just Google what you can find on the pay structure. If you can find something, great. Chances are more often than not, you're going to get a pretty vague range of answers. But what you can do is connect with people who are in the industry as a part of that company. Connect with them personally. A great way to do it is on LinkedIn. What I like to do is I jump in the DMs of the LinkedIn folks. I just hound these folks, like one after the other. Hey, how you doing? My name is Cullen. I'm looking to, join up with your shop. How much would you say an entry-level guy like you made when you got started? Or give me a ballpark of what it would look like if I did this much volume in sales over the course of 3 or 4 months. That's a great way, one, to just get acquainted with the people in your circle, in your industry, but also it gives you a lot of ammunition when you're going to the interviewer with a lot more data on your end. And this is something that's really interesting because this is what companies do, right? They collect as much data about how they can increase their market share in any given market. So why shouldn't you do that? If you're the CEO of your own life, right, you need to be able to come to that table ready to give them a figure that you can back up with data, back up with conversations that you've had. So when the interviewer tells you, hey, so how much were you looking to get paid? You can tell them, well, I've talked to about 15 different folks that across the industry, several within your company. A lot of them have revealed that they can give me up to 75 basis points if I get 2.5 million a month. Sounds pretty good to me. What do you think? And you shouldn't be ashamed to give a figure that you're passionate about, right? You're passionate about eating and you're passionate about being able to live in a house or an apartment, right? So give them a figure. Give them a figure that fits. It doesn't have to be a perfect number. It just has to be a number that gets your foot in the door. And when you get established in the industry, and if you're okay with how much you're getting paid, there's always the opportunity. In fact, it's much, much, much easier to gain more footing in the industry once you've already gotten that first job, and you can just sort of slough off and go to the next one. In fact, like I've said and stated many times, people who switch jobs every couple of years, they're making 50% usually on average more than those people who stay at a job more than 2, 3, 4 years. So to recap, make sure that you get data on a wage that you know you can ask for. 2, ask for the wage that you want. Be prepared to walk away if you can't get it. 3, doesn't have to be a perfect wage, but it's a wage that you can make sure that you can provide for yourself while you're trying to build for a future career. And then 4, go ahead and make moves once you've established yourself in that company or in that industry. And then on the personal note, folks, with your friends, with your family, with your colleagues, make sure to make finance a part of your conversation, right? How much you're paying for things, how much you're spending on things, where you're getting deals and where you're not getting deals and why you're not getting deals. These are really important topics of discussion that can not only enrich others, but enrich yourself as well. I mean, if you know that a banana costs $2 less over at the Marianos and you've been paying $700 for the banana, obviously you're gonna make more money. So this is information that is categorically and supported by data very beneficial to talk about and helps enrich not only people's savings, which are in dire straits as of recently, but people's overall standard of living. If you look at the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, that is going to be the litmus for how bad inflation is getting, but also how much a parcel or a market basket is going to cost when you're going to the grocery store, right? So if you know that the non-essentials are going to be costing more and the essentials are going to be costing more, right? Then you're going to be spending less on the non-essentials, which incidentally is what the Fed said is happening currently. So let me know some stories that you might have had in your life that made you step back and be like, why are you so irrationally angry about this conversation right now? Or maybe just some things that kind of threw you off, maybe in an interview, or maybe just talking with your friends about finance. I guarantee we all have those kind of stories, and for me, it just was really weird, but I have ADD, so who knows. So do you guys like videos like this that talk about personal finance and getting into retirement, maybe a little bit early, trying to get that money, fat stacks, just making it rain all over your family? If you do, please go ahead and leave me that like button. You know I love to see it. Go ahead and comment something beautiful for me and subscribe so that I can bring you more just fire content just like this, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace, guys.